I never thought the person I raised, the son I carried in my heart for decades, could stand on the other side of the battlefield, smiling as if nothing mattered. It was 3 a.m. when I first heard the faint knock on my door. My heart skipped a beat. Who could be here at this hour? I opened it to see my daughter-in-law, Vanessa, standing there, holding a folder and wearing that radiant, unsettling smile. "Mom," she said, voice too sweet, "we have some things to discuss about the future." The word future felt like a trap. My hands tightened around the doorframe as I realized what was coming. My son, Daniel, trailed behind her, eyes wide but strangely vacant. He looked at me with a hesitance that didn't reach his heart, a puppet tied to strings I hadn't seen before. The past few months had been quiet. Too quiet. I thought our family dinners, laughter, and shared memories would protect me. I thought love would be enough. I was wrong. Vanessa stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "We've been thinking about your living arrangements," she continued, walking through my home like it belonged to her. "You know, managing a big house is tiring. It could be much easier if you considered a more convenient place." I followed her, every step echoing my heartbeat. The words were sugar-coated, but my instincts screamed danger. 3 floors of memories, the sofa where I cradled my children when they cried, the dining table where we celebrated birthdays, all of it felt like it was suddenly for sale in their eyes. Daniel tried to speak, but Vanessa cut in. "Don't worry, Mom. We'll help. You'll be comfortable, and everything will be handled." I forced a smile. "That's very considerate." Inside, my mind raced. Considerate? Or calculated? I had spent 67 years building this house, saving every penny, sewing curtains myself to make it feel like home. And now, they wanted me to hand it over as if it were a burden. That night, I called my closest friend, Evelyn. Her voice trembled when I told her what had happened. "Vanessa has no shame," she whispered. "And Daniel. I can't believe he went along with her." I felt a deep, twisting ache in my chest. How could he forget me so quickly? How could he not see the strings Vanessa had been pulling all these years? The next morning, I did something that terrified me. I called 3 senior living facilities Vanessa had mentioned, asking about costs, services, and availability. The numbers they quoted sent chills down my spine. The nicest places ran from $3,500 to $5,000 per month. With my savings, I could manage maybe 2 years at most. After that, what then? A cheaper, lower quality place? Or relying on assistance? My stomach knotted as I realized Vanessa's true plan. She wanted to take my house and make me pay to live in exile with my own money. Later that day, Daniel called. "Mom, you've been thinking about moving, right?" His voice trembled unnaturally, rehearsed. I softened my tone. "I've thought about it carefully," I said, choosing my words like a chess master. "You two are right about a few points." He rushed on, "We'll help you move. You won't be lonely. You're still our mom." I nodded, keeping the mask of gratitude, even though the words tasted like ash. I asked directly about my belongings. "What about everything I've collected all these years?" Daniel hesitated. "You take what matters most?" I replied calmly, "A few pieces. That's enough." Inside, I felt a surge of determination. They didn't just want the house, they wanted my life neatly divided like spoils of war. Every cherished item, every memory, was part of their plan. I had already prepared my counter-strategy. Keep the mask of the wavering, grateful mother. Finish the paperwork with my attorney, Richard Lawson, including options for a quick sale if needed. Lock down security. Every bank account, every asset, untouched by anyone else. I would document everything, texts, emails, proposals, conversations. From now on, every move they made would be recorded in my notebook, waiting for the right moment to strike. I would not be the victim. I would orchestrate the outcome. When Vanessa and Daniel arrived that weekend, they brought brochures, charts, and persuasive smiles. They walked me through beautifully landscaped facilities with modern amenities and friendly staff. You'll love it, Vanessa said, her hug making my skin crawl. I nodded, pretending to consider each option carefully. They were confident, even smug, as they outlined costs and services. $4,200 per month for the first option, expensive but elegant. They exchanged glances that spoke volumes. I played along. That's impressive. Daniel quickly chimed in. We'll help with the cost. A lie. My savings could barely last 2 years there. The third option, cheap and bleak, was obviously their preferred choice. They wanted me to burn through my money while they secured the house. After lunch, Vanessa leaned in, seemingly concerned. Which one do you think fits you best, Mom? I hedged. They all have advantages. Daniel added, the sooner you decide, the sooner you can enjoy a simpler life. Their manipulation was clear, but I held my calm. My plan was unfolding behind the scenes. That afternoon, I called my attorney. Austin, how are the sale papers coming along? 3 offers, all cash, he replied. One for $240,000, closing in 5 business days. Fast, clean, and hassle-free. I accepted immediately. Every move I made was precise, calculated. This was my liberation. I would not be trapped by their greed. Sunday morning, Vanessa's mother called. Sherry, it's wise to move to a place suited for seniors. We'll take care of the house for you. I smiled, hiding my triumph. Yes, it might be best for everyone, I lied. Monday morning, the sale was complete. Funds transferred. Keys ready for the new owner. Vanessa and Daniel thought they were winning. They had no idea that the game had already shifted. When they arrived to review the options, I greeted them cheerfully, every gesture hiding the storm inside. I had sold the house, secured a small, comfortable apartment, and taken back control of my life. Their shock was delicious. Melissa's eyes widened. Daniel's mouth opened and closed, speechless. I told them calmly, the decision is mine. I've thought carefully, and this is the life I choose. Their plan to strip me of my dignity failed. I had kept my self-respect, my assets, and my freedom. I was not powerless. I was Sherry, standing firm, unyielding, and finally free. Monday morning felt different. The sun poured gently through the windows of my new apartment, casting long shadows over the small, cozy living room. I sipped my coffee, feeling the weight of weeks lift from my shoulders. The sale of my house had been quick, discreet, and irreversible. Every room, every corner I had loved for decades was now someone else's responsibility, and yet I felt a strange serenity. Evelyn came over shortly after 9, carrying a box of fresh pastries and her ever-reassuring smile. How does it feel? She asked gently. Free, I said without hesitation. The word hung in the air like a promise, a truth I hadn't dared whisper to myself before. She laughed softly, setting the pastries on the counter. I can see it in your eyes. No more games, no more pretending. I nodded, thinking of Vanessa and Daniel, the lies they had spun, and the arrogance in their plan. They had believed they controlled the board, unaware that the queen had already moved her pieces. Later that morning, I unpacked a few of my most cherished belongings. The small bookshelf where I had kept photographs of every family gathering, the teacup set Daniel had given me when he was 10, and the soft knitted blanket I had finished just last winter. Each item, though fewer than in my old house, carried the same weight of memory, the same warmth of love. It was enough. It would always be enough. The phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Daniel. His voice was hesitant, unsure. Mom. I know we had plans. I didn't know you were so serious about the apartment. I took a deep breath, keeping my tone calm. I am serious. This is my choice. I've thought about it carefully. There was a pause, heavy and uncomfortable. I just want you to be happy. Then you should understand why I did this, I said softly, letting the calm steel of my resolve shine through. I am happy because I am free. That is more important than a house, or any argument over property. I could hear the uncertainty in his voice, the tug-of-war between the woman he married and the mother he had loved all his life. I had hoped for this, had waited for the moment when reality would force him to see the truth. By noon, Evelyn and I had arranged the small living space just the way I wanted. The living room opened into a modest kitchen. A small balcony overlooked a quiet park where children ran and elderly couples walked hand in hand. It was peaceful, bright, and exactly what I needed. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of control. Not the kind granted by wealth or possessions, but the kind that comes from knowing that your choices are truly your own. The next day, I returned to my small shop. The familiar scents, the loyal customers, and the gentle hum of daily life reminded me why I had worked so hard all these years. The shop, combined with my carefully invested savings from the house sale, ensured that I could live comfortably without fear. As the week went on, Daniel's calls became more frequent, softer, more hesitant. He asked about my routines, my meals, and even my little balcony garden. I answered each question honestly but without emotion, giving him the facts without letting him gauge my feelings. Then, unexpectedly, Vanessa called. "Sherry, I just want to check, everything okay?" Her voice, though polite, carried a trace of irritation, frustration thinly veiled as concern. "Everything is fine," I said calmly. "I've settled in well." There was a pause. "We were just trying to help." "I understand," I replied evenly. "But help is only useful when it is wanted." She didn't respond immediately. I could hear the subtle intake of breath, the small crack in her composure. It was the first hint that my actions had shifted the balance of power. Weeks turned into a month. Nathan, my other son, began to call more regularly. Unlike Daniel, who was still tangled in Vanessa's influence, Nathan had been quietly observing, slowly recognizing the manipulation that had taken hold. He arrived one afternoon at the small cafe where Evelyn and I often met. His hands were clasped tightly over his coffee cup, and his eyes were filled with regret. "Mom, I owe you an apology," he said, voice heavy. "I should have seen it sooner. Vanessa, she's been controlling things for years. I didn't realize how much I was following, not leading." I reached across the table, placing a hand over his. "It's never too late to learn," I said gently. "What matters is that you understand now, and that you act differently from here on." His shoulders slumped. "I want to make it right. I don't expect immediate forgiveness. I want to be better, to live in truth, not manipulation." A small, cautious smile curved my lips. "That's all I ask, Nathan. Change takes time, but it is always possible." Daniel, however, remained a challenge. He struggled with his loyalty to Vanessa, with the habits he had allowed her to instill. His calls were infrequent, uncertain, as if he was walking a tightrope between two lives. But I was patient. I had learned the value of time. Some lessons cannot be rushed. Some hearts cannot be pried open until they are ready to accept the truth. One afternoon, as I tended to my balcony garden, a familiar face appeared below. It was Jordan Jr., Daniel's son. He waved enthusiastically, running up the small path toward me with a giggle that warmed my heart. "Grandma," he shouted, throwing his small arms around my legs. "Why aren't you in the big house anymore?" I lifted him into my arms, holding him close. "Because, my dear, I chose a new adventure." His wide eyes searched mine. "Do you like it?" "I love it," I said, smiling down at him. "It fits me just right." In that moment, I understood something profound. Even if the bonds with my sons were strained, the connection with my grandson remained untouchable. He did not care about the house, the furniture, or the past mistakes. He cared about love, attention, and trust. Half a year later, I received a call from Daniel. His voice was steadier than before. "Mom, Vanessa and I are getting a divorce." I wasn't surprised. I had anticipated this. "How do you feel?" I asked softly, genuinely curious. "Relieved," he admitted. "I've been living her life, not mine. Losing you, even for a while, was too high a price to wake me up." I let a small sigh escape. "I hope you learned something." He paused. "I did. Respect and love can't be faked. A mother like you deserves to be honored, not betrayed. The words moved me, but I stayed cautious. Wounds run deep and trust takes time to rebuild. Now, I sit on my small balcony with a cup of coffee, watching children play in the park, and elderly couples walk hand in hand. Peace fills the space around me. I lost a house, yes, but I kept my dignity. I said goodbye to the illusion of a perfect family, but I embraced the reality of self-respect. At 68, I understand something vital. It is never too late to say no, to protect yourself, to choose the life you want. Work is fulfilling, my savings are secure, and my friendships are stronger than ever. Nathan visits slowly, gently trying to mend what was broken, and I welcome him carefully, without rushing. I am still Sherry, steady, calm, and free. And in the quiet moments of reflection, I realize my greatest pain was not losing the house, but discovering who was truly on my side. The mornings in my new apartment became a ritual of quiet reflection. Sunlight spilled across the small living room, catching the edges of the teacups I had unpacked, the delicate photographs on the shelf, and the soft, worn blanket I kept draped over the armchair. Each item was a token of memory, a tether to the life I had lived, yet a reminder that I was no longer bound by the expectations or manipulations of others. I poured myself a cup of tea and watched the park below. Children laughed and ran, their carefree movements like a balm to the wounds I had carried for so long. A gentle breeze ruffled the pages of the book I had been reading the night before. The story of a woman who reclaimed her life resonated deeply. I smiled faintly, feeling as though her triumph mirrored my own. It was then that my phone buzzed. Nathan's name appeared on the screen. He rarely called this early, and a sense of caution prickled at me. "Good morning, Mom," he said, voice tentative. I just wanted to check if you're settling in okay." "Morning, Nathan," I replied evenly, not letting my curiosity or wariness show. "I'm settling in beautifully. The apartment feels like home already." There was a pause on the other end, a hesitation that spoke volumes about the guilt and fear he carried. I've been thinking," he continued slowly, "about everything. About my decisions, and about Vanessa's influence. I want to do better. Not just for me, but for you. For Jordan too." I leaned back in my chair, studying his words. "Acknowledging the truth is the first step, Nathan. Now, the next step is action, not excuses." He sighed, a long, weary sound. "I know. I feel lost sometimes. I don't want to lose you again, Mom." "You won't," I said softly, and meant it. "Because I am choosing my peace. And my peace is not negotiable." After our conversation, I made my way to the shop. The bell chimed as I entered, and familiar faces greeted me. My regulars smiled warmly, asking about the move, the apartment, and how I was adjusting. I realized then how much I had missed this, being part of a community, being valued for who I was rather than what I possessed. Hours passed quickly, and when I returned to the apartment, the sunlight had shifted. Shadows stretched across the floor, and I allowed myself to breathe, to simply be. The evening brought a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it to find Jordan Jr., unaccompanied. "Grandma," he cried, rushing into my arms. "I missed you." I held him tightly, the small weight of his body comforting, grounding me in the present. "I missed you too, sweetheart," I whispered. He looked up at me, wide-eyed. "Where's the big house? Why don't you live there anymore?" I smiled gently, brushing a stray hair from his forehead. "Because I chose a new adventure, one that fits me perfectly." He giggled. "I like it here. Your balcony has a park." His innocence, his honesty, reminded me why I had fought so hard to reclaim my autonomy. It was not about money, or houses, or even family approval. It was about living a life true to myself, where love and respect were not conditional. Days later, Nathan came over for a brief visit. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, guilt etched deeply into his features. "Mom, I saw how you handled Vanessa and Daniel. I wish I had that courage," he admitted quietly. "You have it within you," I replied firmly. Courage isn't always loud or visible. Sometimes, it's choosing to protect yourself and your peace quietly, without drama or public attention. He nodded, taking in my words. I want to learn from you. Then start by taking responsibility, I said, for your actions, your words, and your loyalties. It's not enough to regret, you must act differently from here on. The following week, I decided to host a small gathering in my apartment. Evelyn helped me prepare. We baked cookies, brewed fresh coffee, and set out pastries on the tiny table. It was not just a social event, it was a reclamation of normalcy, of warmth, and of boundaries. Jordan Jr. ran around, playing quietly with toys in the corner. Nathan helped clear dishes, awkward at first, but gradually more comfortable as he realized this was not a confrontation, but a chance to reconnect. That evening, as the apartment settled into silence, I reflected on how far I had come. I had faced deception, manipulation, and betrayal, and yet I had emerged not broken, but empowered. The sale of the house had been more than a financial decision, it had been symbolic. Every key I handed over, every document signed, was a reclaiming of agency I had almost lost. Late at night, I reviewed my journal, the careful notes I had taken during the past weeks. Every call, every interaction, every manipulation attempt by Vanessa and Daniel was documented. I realized I had not only survived their schemes, but I had turned their ambition into evidence of my foresight. One day, if necessary, these records would serve as a reminder, and perhaps protection, against further attempts. Then came a knock that made my heart race. It was Vanessa. She stood there, the picture of false cheer. "Sherry, can we talk?" she asked, her voice dripping with forced sweetness. I gestured for her to sit, keeping my tone calm. "Of course, Vanessa. Let's talk." She tried to charm, to persuade, to guilt me into reconsidering the apartment or the sale. But I was unmoved. Every smile, every word was met with polite neutrality. "You don't understand," she said finally, frustration creeping in. "We were only trying to help." I leaned forward slightly, eyes steady. "Help is only helpful when it is wanted. And your version of help was manipulation, disguised as concern. I am not interested in that." Her expression faltered. "You can't just take the house and leave us with nothing." I allowed myself a small, controlled laugh. "It was never yours to take. And my decision is final. I live for peace now, not power struggles." She left without another word, slamming the door. I exhaled slowly, savoring the silence that followed. It was then I realized the true lesson of these weeks. Power is not always about control over others. True power is control over oneself, and for the first time in decades, I felt that power fully. The apartment, the shop, my freedom, my dignity, they were mine, and no one could take them away without my consent. I spent the next few days tending to my life carefully. Small routines brought joy, a morning walk, baking with Evelyn, watching Jordan Jr. play. Nathan visited more often, slowly bridging the gap that had formed between us. His apologies were sincere, his attempts to reconnect genuine. Daniel, still entangled in the remnants of Vanessa's influence, remained cautious. But I knew, with time, clarity would reach him too. For now, I focused on my own rhythm, my own life. I was no longer bound by the expectations of others or the illusion of family entitlement. I had learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes, saying no is the most loving act you can take, for yourself and for those around you. And in the quiet moments, sipping coffee on my balcony, watching the world unfold below, I knew I had chosen correctly. I had chosen peace, autonomy, and dignity. The morning air in my new apartment was crisp, carrying the scent of dew and distant flowers from the park below. I stood on the balcony, my hands wrapped around a warm mug of coffee, and let the calm seep into my bones. For the first time in years, I did not feel the weight of expectation pressing down on me, nor the looming presence of those who would manipulate for gain. Jordan Jr.'s laughter drifted from the park, pure and untainted, reminding me why I had fought so hard. Today, I was determined to reclaim more than just my physical space. I had plans, subtle yet deliberate, to rebuild the bridges I wanted to cross, while fortifying the walls around my life where I needed them. After breakfast, I prepared to visit my shop, my sanctuary where creativity and independence converged. Evelyn was already there, arranging pastries and greeting the early customers with her usual warmth. "Good morning, Sherry," she said, her eyes twinkling with quiet approval. "You look different." "I feel different," I replied, allowing a small smile. "Free, finally. That freedom is worth more than I ever imagined." As the day unfolded, I noticed subtle glances from patrons who sensed the shift in my presence. There was a steadiness in my posture, a confidence in my voice, and an unmistakable clarity in my gaze. News travels fast in small communities, and I had no doubt whispers of my bold actions, the sale of the house, the refusal to bow to manipulation, were circulating. It was a strange sensation, being both admired and envied for the same act. Choosing myself. Around noon, my phone rang. "Nathan." My chest tightened slightly, but I answered calmly. "Mom, can we meet?" he asked hesitantly. "I want to talk, really talk this time." "Of course," I said. "Come by the shop in an hour. We'll have coffee." He arrived punctually, and I noted the changes in him. His shoulders no longer carried the same tension, though guilt lingered in his eyes. "Mom, I owe you more than I can ever repay," he said, voice quivering. I let Vanessa sway me. I didn't see how wrong I was. "You're seeing it now," I replied evenly. "That's the first step. But seeing is not enough, you must act differently from here on." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I want to. I really do." I reached across the table, touching his hand lightly. "Then start small. Honor your commitments. Speak honestly. Listen without judgment. And remember, respect is earned, not demanded." He blinked, absorbing each word. "I understand. I want to become the man you raised, not the one I allowed to be manipulated." I felt a surge of pride, tempered by caution. Healing takes time, and trust must be rebuilt brick by brick. The afternoon passed with a flurry of customers, deliveries, and Evelyn's constant cheer. Jordan Jr. arrived briefly, skipping into the shop with the energy only a child can muster. "Grandma, look at my drawing," he exclaimed, thrusting a crumpled piece of paper into my hands. I examined the chaotic yet charming sketches of houses, trees, and people smiling. "It's beautiful," I said sincerely. "You have a gift, just like your dad did." His face lit up, and for a moment, all the tension from the past weeks melted away. After he left, I returned to my office in the shop, reviewing the financial statements. The proceeds from the house, invested carefully, had already begun generating additional income. With this security, I could live comfortably, invest in my shop, and even plan small adventures I had long postponed. Yet, the real wealth was not monetary. It was the knowledge that I could navigate treachery and emerge intact. That evening, as I prepared dinner alone, I felt a pang of nostalgia. The old kitchen, once bustling with family, now existed only in memory. I had let go of the past house, but not the lessons etched into every corner, every countertop, every creaking floorboard. I poured a glass of wine and raised it quietly to the empty room. "To freedom," I whispered. The phone rang again. "Jordan." My pulse quickened, though I reminded myself to remain composed. "Mom, I just wanted to see how you're doing," he said, voice low and hesitant. "I'm doing well, Jordan." "Really well," I replied. "The apartment suits me, and life is peaceful. How are you?" He hesitated, then sighed. "I've been reflecting. Vanessa, she was controlling in ways I didn't fully grasp. I feel relieved you didn't let her have her way." You've realized the truth," I said softly, yet firmly. "That's important. But remember, freedom is not just about others' influence. It's about standing firm in what you believe is right." There was silence on the line, then a faint, "I hope I can make things right, Mom. Slowly, if you allow it." "You will," I said, the conviction in my voice unwavering. But change takes consistency, not apologies alone. After the call, I sat on the balcony again, watching the sun dip behind the trees. It struck me that life had a rhythm all its own, and I had merely learned to tune in rather than fight the current. Later that night, Evelyn called to check on me. "Sherry, you sound at peace," she said, her voice soft. "I am, Evelyn." It's the first time in years I feel like I truly belong to myself, I admitted. You've earned it. You were brave enough to reclaim your life when most would have crumbled, she said warmly. I smiled, letting the warmth of her words wash over me. It wasn't just bravery. It was necessity. And now, I'm finally living on my own terms. Sleep came easily that night, untroubled by fear, resentment, or manipulation. The next morning, I woke to the sound of birds outside the window and the faint hum of children in the park. I realized that peace, once earned, was not fleeting. It could be nurtured, expanded, and protected. I poured coffee, sat on the balcony, and allowed myself to plan small joys, visits to friends, trips to the library. Afternoons baking with Evelyn. Jordan Jr. would continue to bring laughter and innocence, reminding me why boundaries were essential and why choices must always honor oneself. That afternoon, Nathan stopped by unannounced. I braced for tension, but instead, he handed me a small bouquet of wildflowers. I saw these and thought of you, he said, voice tentative but sincere. I accepted them, touched by the gesture. Thank you, Nathan. It's the thought that counts more than anything. He lingered, then spoke softly. Mom. I want to be better. For real this time. I want to support you, not control you. You already have the blueprint, I said with a gentle smile. Respect, honesty, patience. Follow it, and our bond can grow stronger than before. He nodded, hope flickering in his eyes. I will. I promise. The days turned into weeks, and the apartment became not just a refuge, but a sanctuary. Evelyn and I organized small gatherings for friends. I spent hours in the shop, perfecting recipes, interacting with customers, and reclaiming joy that had been overshadowed for too long. Jordan Jr. visited frequently, filling my space with laughter, chatter, and innocence untouched by greed. And slowly, Nathan began to visit with intention rather than obligation, rebuilding trust brick by brick. Through every interaction, I realized that life, though unpredictable and often harsh, had given me a second chance, not just at survival, but at truly thriving. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, painting the apartment in soft gold. I sipped my coffee slowly, feeling the serenity of a home truly my own. But even in freedom, shadows lingered, subtle echoes of the manipulation I had narrowly escaped. I knew Vanessa would not relinquish control so easily, and her whispers would reach my sons if I let my guard down. I opened my journal, the one where I kept meticulous records, and began reviewing each interaction, each plan, each proposal they had made. It was a strange mixture of relief and satisfaction to see the web of their intentions laid bare on paper. Every suggested kindness and every subtle coercion now read like a blueprint of attempted theft. As I traced the lines, I realized how close I had been to losing not just my house, but my autonomy. I remembered Melissa's brazen confidence, Jordan's hesitant nods, and the chilling calm of their offers. I allowed myself a small smile. They had underestimated me, thinking old age meant weakness. I had turned their plans into my advantage, and the sale of the house had been the perfect counterstrike. Yet, I could not ignore the ache in my heart, the fragments of family trust fractured in the process. It was one thing to reclaim property and finances, quite another to repair emotional bonds. I set the journal aside and prepared to visit the park, needing to walk, think, and breathe in the freedom I had earned. The path was quiet, dotted with families and elderly couples strolling hand in hand. Jordan Jr. spotted me and ran over, his backpack bouncing with each step. Grandma. Guess what I learned at school, he shouted, his excitement bubbling over. I laughed and crouched to meet his eyes. What is it, my little scholar? He beamed. We learned about heroes today. And I told my class about you. You're my hero, Grandma. My chest tightened, and I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. Thank you, sweetheart, I whispered, stroking his hair. But heroes are ordinary people who do what's right, even when it's hard. He nodded solemnly, absorbing every word. You always do what's right, Grandma. That's why I love you. We walked together, and he recounted tales of schoolyard adventures, showing me each drawing and every small treasure he carried. Even amidst the innocence of childhood, I could feel the subtle presence of his parents' influence, now tempered by my protective vigilance. Returning to the apartment, I found a letter slipped under the door, and signed. It contained a delicate threat disguised as advice. Some doors once closed can reopen if you're not careful. Be mindful of who you trust. I held the paper, feeling the familiar tingle of caution. Vanessa's shadow reached farther than I anticipated, but I had prepared for this. I placed the letter in my journal and made a mental note to review security measures, update passwords, and ensure that no unauthorized eyes could access my assets. Later that afternoon, Evelyn stopped by with a basket of fresh fruits and baked bread. "Sherry, you seem stronger every day," she said warmly, arranging the basket on the counter. "I feel it." Evelyn. Freedom isn't just about having choices, it's about knowing you can act on them without fear, I replied. She nodded, clearly understanding the depth of my journey. "And you've proven it. They thought they could manipulate you, and look at you now." Her words brought a flush of pride. "It wasn't luck," I said firmly. "It was strategy, patience, and the will to protect my life and dignity." By evening, I received a call from Nathan. His tone was measured, almost cautious. "Mom, I've been thinking," he began. "I want to do something meaningful, not just for me, but for us. For the family." I raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "I want to help others, the way you've taught me through your actions. Not through control, but through genuine support. Maybe volunteering at a senior center? Or helping neighbors?" I felt a warmth in my chest, a sign that he was beginning to understand the difference between manipulation and true care. "That's a good start," I said softly. "Actions speak louder than words, Nathan. And if you do this sincerely, it will heal more than just your conscience." He hesitated, then added, "I've also started seeing a counselor, to work on myself." I realize now how easily I let influence override judgment. I smiled, a real, gentle smile. That's maturity. Recognizing weakness is the first step toward strength. Later that night, as the city lights twinkled outside my window, I reflected on the weeks that had passed. The sale of the house had been swift, the apartment perfectly suited, and my shop thriving. Yet, the most profound changes were not in property or finances, they were internal. I had reclaimed my autonomy, learned to identify subtle coercion, and discovered that courage could exist even in moments of fear. The next morning, I found myself walking past the old house. It was no longer mine, yet I felt no bitterness. Caleb Morgan, the investor, had promised to care for it as a family home for his grandchildren. Seeing the windows glinting in the sun, I felt a sense of closure. The memories were mine to keep, and the physical space could now belong to those who would appreciate it in their own way. Back in my apartment, I sat down at the kitchen table with my journal. I began drafting plans for the coming months. Workshops at the shop, community events, and small excursions. Freedom was not passive, it required action, creativity, and vigilance. Evelyn arrived to help me organize a small garden on the balcony. "Imagine," she said, "planting herbs and flowers, how much brighter this place will feel in the spring." "It already feels like life itself," I replied, planting a small basil sapling with care. Through the scent of soil and the gentle touch of leaves, I realized how much control I had regained, not over anyone else, but over my own existence. That night, Nathan returned for dinner, bringing a tentative warmth and a new willingness to listen. We talked about the past, but more importantly, about the future. How family could be reconstructed through respect, patience, and honesty. I felt the first real hint of reconciliation, not based on coercion, but on understanding. As I poured wine, I silently acknowledged the transformation in all of us. The house, once a battleground, had become a memory, a lesson in vigilance and strength. The apartment, small but secure, represented freedom and a life rebuilt on my own terms. Even the shadows of Vanessa and Melissa seemed less ominous now, diminished by preparation and insight. Before bed, I sat on the balcony once more, watching the lights of the park reflect in the dark water of a nearby fountain. The wind carried the scent of blossoms, and I felt, for the first time in decades, an unshakable sense of peace. Not because the past had vanished, but because I had claimed the present, and in doing so, the future. I whispered to the night, "I am Sherry. I am strong. I am free. And I will live my life fully, without fear of being robbed of it again." The city hummed softly, the world moving on, unaware of the quiet victory that had been won in a small apartment, in the heart of a woman who had finally said no to manipulation. The morning air was crisp as I stepped onto my balcony, cup of tea in hand, watching the park awaken below. Children ran freely, their laughter drifting up like tiny bells. An elderly couple strolled slowly, leaning on each other's support. It was a scene of ordinary life, yet for me, every detail carried the weight of reclaimed freedom. I had sold the house, moved into my small apartment, and quietly begun rebuilding the life Vanessa and Melissa had tried to manipulate out of my hands. Still, a part of me wondered about Jordan and Nathan, whether the lessons they needed had sunk in or if resentment lingered. Later that morning, my phone rang. It was Nathan. "Mom," he said, his voice careful, hesitant. "Can we meet?" I want to talk. About everything." I nodded silently to myself. This was the moment I had been waiting for, not out of vindictiveness, but for clarity, for the restoration of trust. "Of course, Nathan. Let's meet at the cafe near your office," I replied. An hour later, I walked into the cafe. Nathan was already there, staring at the table, hands clasped. He looked older, as if the weight of guilt had pressed on him, molding him into someone new. I sat across from him, placing my hands on the table, steadying myself for the conversation. I owe you an apology, Mom," he began, voice tight. "I let Melissa influence me. I thought I was protecting you, but I wasn't. I hurt you." I felt a lump in my throat. The words I had longed to hear, finally spoken. "Nathan," I said softly, "the past cannot be undone. But acknowledgement is the first step toward change. Do you truly understand what happened?" He swallowed, nodding slowly. "I see now how easily I gave up my own judgment. I didn't see your strength, your sacrifices, or your autonomy. I thought I knew what was best, but I was wrong." I reached out and touched his hand. "It's never too late to learn, Nathan. That is the lesson I hope you carry with you." He looked up, eyes glistening. "I want to be better. I don't want to repeat those mistakes. I don't want my children, my family, to think that control is love." A wave of relief washed over me. The tension I had held for months began to melt, replaced by hope. "Good," I said quietly. "Because respect, honesty, and understanding are what make a family. Not manipulation or fear." He nodded, and for a moment, we sat in silence, letting the weight of words settle. Then he asked cautiously, How are you feeling, Mom?" "Really?" I smiled faintly, a mixture of fatigue and triumph. "Stronger than ever. I've learned to trust myself. I've learned that peace is more valuable than possessions, more precious than compliance." Nathan's eyes softened. "I see that. And I want to be part of your life in that way, not to control or guide, but to support." It was a revelation to hear him say that. The son who had almost participated in my undoing now wanted to rebuild a genuine bond. We talked for hours, sharing memories, laughter, and even tears. The cafe became a sanctuary, a place where broken bridges could be mended, where honesty replaced deception. Nathan told me about his struggles with Melissa, how he had slowly recognized her influence in every choice he had made. "I realize now," he said quietly, "that I've been living someone else's life. And I'm ready to live my own, without manipulation, without fear of losing what matters." I squeezed his hand, feeling a deep surge of pride. "That is the man I raised, Nathan. It's always within you, you just needed to see it for yourself." He smiled faintly, eyes bright. "And I want to help Jordan see it too." I nodded. Jordan had been quieter, more compliant with Melissa's schemes. But I knew, with Nathan leading by example, the awakening would come. Later that evening, as I returned to my apartment, the sun dipping behind distant rooftops, I found Jordan waiting at my door. He looked uncertain, hesitant, yet there was a vulnerability in his stance I had never seen before. "Mom," he said softly, "I need to speak to you. Alone." I gestured for him to come in. We sat in the living room, the familiar walls of my new home surrounding us, neutral, safe, yet carrying the weight of the past. I realize now how wrong I was," he began, voice trembling. "Melissa, she's been controlling me for years, not just about the house, but about everything. I didn't see it until it was too late. And I almost hurt you because of it." I felt my chest tighten. The fear, the betrayal, all the months of manipulation, they had left scars, but this acknowledgement felt like a balm. You're here now, Jordan. That matters more than what came before, I said, trying to hold my own tears at bay. He swallowed and continued, I don't want to repeat those mistakes. I want to be a son who respects and honors his mother, not one who follows someone else blindly. I reached out, touching his shoulder gently. It will take time, Jordan. Trust is rebuilt slowly. But your honesty today is the first step. He nodded, relief flooding his face. I want to make things right, Mom. Not with words, but with actions. We spent hours talking, sharing memories, untangling the web of past misunderstandings. Jordan recounted instances where Melissa had steered decisions subtly, using guilt and persuasion, and how he had unknowingly complied. I listened patiently, offering guidance without judgment, allowing him to process his own awakening. By the time evening shadows stretched across the room, we had reached a tentative understanding. He promised to focus on his own growth, to distance himself from controlling influences, and to nurture a relationship with me built on respect. I realized then that the greatest battles are not always fought over property or money, but over the reclamation of one's autonomy and dignity. The next morning, I visited the park again, Jordan Jr. in tow, and Nathan joined us, his presence a reassuring anchor. We walked together, the three generations moving in a quiet harmony, learning, healing, and finding joy in small victories. I felt tears prick my eyes as I watched my sons interact with their children, not as manipulators or pawns, but as fathers seeking to do better. The sun rose higher, casting light on the path we had yet to walk, but also illuminating the progress we had made. It was a beginning, fragile but promising, a testament to resilience, courage, and the power of saying no to deceit and coercion. That night, I sat on my balcony, sipping tea and watching the city lights reflect in the park pond. Nathan called to check in, and Jordan sent a brief message. Both gestures, small but significant, reminded me that the bonds of family could heal when respect replaced control. I smiled, feeling a deep, enduring peace. Freedom was no longer just a physical state, it was emotional, psychological, and spiritual. I whispered into the night, I am Sherry. I am strong. I am free. And I am not alone, even when I choose to stand on my own. The city hummed softly, unaware of the quiet victories unfolding in a small apartment, a place of rebirth, reflection, and the rekindling of genuine familial love. The shadows of the past would always remain, but they were no longer chains, they were lessons, guiding us toward better choices, deeper understanding, and the courage to live authentically. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, painting stripes across my kitchen floor. I sipped my coffee slowly, listening to the distant sounds of the city waking up. Life had settled into a rhythm I cherished, quiet, controlled, free from the manipulations of Melissa and her schemes. Yet a nagging unease lingered in the corners of my mind. They had been cunning, relentless. I knew it wasn't over, and deep down, I suspected they would try again. Just as I set down my cup, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I hesitated but answered. Hello? I said cautiously, Sherry, it's Vanessa. The voice was calm, almost sweet, but I could hear the undercurrent of manipulation. I hope you're enjoying your new little arrangement, she continued. My stomach tightened. I had expected this call eventually. Yes, Vanessa. I am, I replied evenly. Thank you for your concern. There was a pause, then she spoke again. You know, the neighborhood isn't quite like our family home. I hope you don't feel isolated. I swallowed a sharp laugh. I feel peaceful, Vanessa. That's more than I could say before. Another pause. I see. Well, enjoy your freedom, Sherry. But freedom has a price, doesn't it? I felt the familiar surge of anger, yet I stayed calm. Perhaps. But I'm willing to pay it, I said softly. And so far, it's been worth every moment. She laughed lightly, almost mockingly. We'll see how long it lasts. People always get lonely. People always return to what they know. I felt the call of battle awaken within me, not for my house, but for my peace, my dignity, my life. I'm not returning to manipulation, Vanessa. Not for any price, I said firmly. Her voice dropped, colder now. Very well. But know this, Sherry, I always have a way back into a game. The line went dead, and I let out a slow breath. I was shaken, but not broken. Melissa and Vanessa had underestimated me once. They would not succeed again. I poured my remaining coffee and stared out the window, thinking of my sons, Jordan and Nathan, and the fragile bonds we were rebuilding. That afternoon, Nathan called, his voice tinged with worry. "Mom, I spoke with Jordan. He's concerned. He thinks Melissa might escalate things." I nodded to myself. I had anticipated this. "Thank you for telling me, Nathan," I said gently. "But I prepared." "Let them try. I am ready." He hesitated. "Are you sure?" I don't want anything to happen to you." I smiled faintly, a mixture of warmth and determination. "I am always cautious, Nathan. That's why I sold the house discreetly. That's why every move is documented. Trust me, everything is under control." Later, I met Jordan at the park, his hands gripping the straps of his backpack tightly. He looked nervous, his posture tense. "Mom, I can't stop thinking about Melissa. She's unpredictable," he admitted. I put a hand on his shoulder. "Jordan, you've seen her influence. You know now what manipulation looks like. Do not let fear control you. You are capable of making your own choices." He nodded slowly. "I want to believe that. I want to be free of her control, but she's persistent." I pulled him close, my heart aching. "Persistence alone does not equal power, Jordan. You have a voice, and you have judgment. Trust yourself." He looked at me, eyes wide, as if finally understanding the weight of my words. "Mom, do you ever regret selling the house?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "Never. It was never about bricks and walls. It was about what they represented, control. And I chose myself over that. Always." Jordan remained silent for a moment, reflecting. "Melissa, she's been using everyone's expectations, Mom. My father, my son, even me," he admitted. "You've seen the truth, Jordan. And now, you can act on it," I said gently. The following week brought another test. Melissa appeared at my apartment, unannounced, her smile radiating false warmth. "Sherry, darling. What a lovely little place you have," she cooed. I invited her in, maintaining my calm demeanor, letting her enter but controlling the space. Her eyes swept over my belongings, lingering on each detail, trying to uncover weakness, insecurity. "You know, this is so quaint, but don't you miss the grandeur of your old home?" she asked lightly, as if striking at a nerve. I laughed softly, a sound both warm and resolute. "I miss the burden, yes. The freedom here is far more valuable than size or status." She narrowed her eyes, sensing she had lost control. "Oh, Sherry, you're always so clever," she said, masking irritation with forced flattery. I smiled back, my resolve firm. "Clever enough to protect what truly matters, my peace and my family's respect." Melissa paused, studying me, then attempted a different tactic. "I brought some photos of Maple Grove residents. It's, a shame you didn't take my advice," she said, laying a stack of glossy pictures on the table. I glanced at them briefly, letting her think they might sway me. "Beautiful," I murmured. "I'm sure it's perfect for those who prefer to surrender their choices." Her face tightened. "Sherry, you don't have to be difficult. We only want what's best for you." I leaned forward, eyes steady, voice calm but cutting. "You want what's best for you, Melissa. I choose what's best for me. The house is gone, and my life remains mine. Every step, every decision, I control." She recoiled slightly, the mask slipping. You think you can outmaneuver me," she hissed, her tone no longer friendly. I leaned back, serene, unafraid. "I don't think. I know. Your games are no longer effective here. This is my life, my home, my choices." Melissa stormed out shortly after, her threats whispered but emptied. I watched her leave and felt the intoxicating mix of relief and triumph. Freedom was not granted, it was seized, and this time, I would not let anyone steal it again. That evening, I called Nathan and Jordan, recounting the encounter. They listened, tense, but also emboldened. "We're proud of you, Mom," Nathan said quietly. I don't know how you do it," Jordan admitted. I still struggled to keep my composure around her. "You will," I said gently. Strength comes with clarity and practice. Remember that fear has no power over those who know themselves. Over the next days, the apartment became our sanctuary. We shared meals, stories, and small victories, each one reinforcing the bonds that Melissa had tried to erode. Jordan Jr. visited often, his laughter echoing through the small rooms, reminding us of innocence untouched by manipulation. I found myself journaling more, documenting every interaction, every threat, and every attempt to control or persuade. The notebook was not a symbol of distrust, but of preparedness, a silent testament to lessons learned the hard way. It became clear to me that protection was not merely defensive, it was proactive, requiring awareness, courage, and strategy. And as the sun set each day, I watched my sons grow, not through control, but through realization, reflection, and the courage to make choices independently. I realized then that the truest victory was not in reclaiming a house, a title, or even material possessions. It was in restoring the moral and emotional architecture of my family, teaching them that integrity, respect, and love cannot be coerced or bought. That night, as I sipped tea on the balcony, I whispered a quiet affirmation: I am Sherry. I stand unshaken. I guard my life, my dignity, and my peace. And nothing, no threat, no manipulation, can take this from me. The city lights reflected on the glass balcony doors, a mosaic of freedom and resilience, and for the first time in months, I felt the complete weight of my choices and their consequences. Not just surviving, not just winning against deceit, but thriving in the quiet, unwavering power of self-determination. The morning air was crisp as I stepped onto my balcony, the park below alive with children laughing and elderly couples walking hand in hand. I sipped my coffee slowly, savoring the quiet that had become my sanctuary. It was a fragile piece, but one I had earned with vigilance and patience. Yet, in the back of my mind, I could feel the shadows shifting. Melissa was not the type to accept defeat, and Vanessa's subtle threats had already left their mark. I knew sooner or later, they would attempt another maneuver. I finished my coffee, straightened my shoulders, and turned inside, ready to face whatever might come. The phone rang, sharp and sudden, startling me from my thoughts. It was Jordan. His voice strained and urgent. Mom. I think Melissa's planning something new, he said, almost in a whisper. My heart skipped a beat, but I forced calm into my voice. What makes you say that, Jordan? I asked evenly, though every nerve in my body was alert. She's been calling my colleagues, Nathan's friends, even the real estate agent we used, he continued. I leaned against the counter, eyes narrowing. They're trying to find leverage, something, anything that can give them a foothold. I nodded slowly. We expected this. Let them dig. We have nothing to hide, and everything to protect. Jordan sighed. It's just. I feel helpless sometimes, Mom. She's relentless. I placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Relentless does not mean invincible. You must remember that her power is fear and manipulation. We have neither. He looked at me, searching for reassurance. You really think we can stop her? I smiled faintly, a mixture of warmth and steel. I know we can. Strategy, documentation, and clarity, they're weapons stronger than any deceit. After our conversation, I called Nathan, who agreed to meet me that afternoon. We convened at the small cafe near my apartment, a neutral territory, warm and quiet. I explained the situation calmly, outlining every possible approach Melissa could take. Nathan listened, eyes wide, absorbing each detail. I had no idea she could be this calculated, he admitted, shaking his head. Calculating is what people like her do, I said firmly. It doesn't make them clever, it makes them predictable if you know what to watch for. We drew up a plan. Every contact, every inquiry Melissa had made would be countered with careful observation, documenting every attempt to manipulate or intimidate. I reminded my sons that control was an illusion unless it was based on action, not fear. The cafe felt like a war room, yet the conversation was infused with a deep sense of purpose. We knew that knowledge, preparedness, and unity would be our shields. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I returned to the apartment, the warm glow of the lamps casting long shadows across the walls. I began reviewing the notebook, checking off previous encounters and recording the new threats. Each line of text became a blueprint for defense. Then, just as I was preparing to rest, a knock echoed at the door. I froze, holding my breath, before walking cautiously to answer. It was Melissa, smiling, a bright facade concealing her fury. Sherry, darling. What a surprise. May I come in? She asked sweetly. I studied her carefully, my heartbeat steady. Of course, Melissa. Please, come in, I said, keeping my tone light. She stepped inside, her eyes sweeping the apartment, lingering on every item, every detail, as if hunting for weakness. You've made this place cozy, she remarked, running her fingers along the counter. Cozy is exactly what I wanted, I replied evenly. Melissa smiled, a little too wide, a little too forced. I just want you to be comfortable, Sherry. We care about you, truly. Her words were a dagger cloaked in velvet. And I appreciate your concern, Melissa, I said softly, keeping my voice calm. But I prefer to make my own choices about comfort and care. She tilted her head, studying me, sensing she wasn't in control. You know, Sherry. Maple Grove was just the beginning, she said carefully, choosing words that hinted at deeper schemes. I raised an eyebrow, maintaining my composure. Oh? And what might come next? She laughed lightly, a sound that didn't reach her eyes. I simply want what's best for you. Sometimes that means guiding you, gently. I smiled, a quiet, lethal smile. Guidance without consent is manipulation, Melissa. I trust you understand the difference. Her smile faltered, and for a moment, I saw the flash of frustration I had anticipated. She changed tactics, pulling out her folder, filled with brochures, photos, and lists. We've done some research on other options. Just in case, you might reconsider. Places with more activities, more security, more social connections, she said, presenting them like a temptation. I glanced at the images, nodding slightly, letting her believe I was considering her suggestions. You've been thorough, I murmured, hiding the surge of triumph I felt. Melissa's eyes sparkled with satisfaction, unaware that each moment she lingered only strengthened my resolve. I thanked her lightly, placing the folder aside, my tone casual. I'll review them, I said, and decide in my own time. Her lips pressed together, hiding her disappointment. Of course, Sherry. Take your time. But remember, these decisions shape the future. I nodded solemnly, a mask of reflection hiding the fire that burned within me. After she left, I sat down at the small kitchen table, opening my notebook and reviewing every detail. Every encounter, every call, every subtle threat was meticulously logged. I knew Melissa and Vanessa would escalate, but I was ready. Strategy was my armor, and I had built it patiently, brick by brick. That night, I called Evelyn to update her, explaining the visit and the renewed threats. Evelyn listened, her voice calm, but concerned. Sherry, you've handled this brilliantly. But promise me, you won't take unnecessary risks. They're cunning. I know, I said firmly. But preparation is my safeguard. Every move they make, every word they utter, is recorded and accounted for. They can't surprise me. I went to bed with a sense of solemn resolve, knowing that the coming days would test our strength and unity. Melissa's persistence was a storm on the horizon, but I was the calm at its center. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was fortified with the knowledge that I had reclaimed my agency, my dignity, and my life. The next morning brought clarity. I reviewed every interaction, anticipating their moves, and creating contingencies for every possible scenario. Nathan called mid-morning, his voice lighter than it had been in weeks. Mom, I've been thinking, maybe it's time I confront Melissa directly, make her understand she cannot manipulate or control anyone anymore, he said. Careful, Nathan, I advised. Confrontation without strategy can backfire. But yes, you must establish boundaries. Make your voice heard firmly and calmly. He sighed, a mix of relief and nervousness. I will. I promise. By the afternoon, Jordan stopped by, leaning over the balcony to speak to me. Mom, I'm ready too. I want to step out of her shadow, finally, he said. I smiled warmly. Then let's do this together. But remember, power lies not in anger, but in clarity, control, and documentation. We act when we are ready, not when fear pushes us. That evening, I sat alone with my notebook, reviewing the events, the conversations, and the small victories we had won. I realized the ultimate battle wasn't against Melissa or Vanessa, it was against complacency, fear, and the temptation to let others dictate my life. I had chosen self-respect over material comfort, I had chosen dignity over manipulation, and now, armed with strategy, love for my sons, and unwavering determination, I was ready to face whatever storm they brought next. The weekend arrived with a tension that clung to my skin like morning mist. Melissa and Vanessa had scheduled a family gathering at my apartment, under the guise of discussing my future living arrangements. I knew it was a trap, a calculated move to pressure me into compliance. I brewed a pot of coffee, baked a small batch of cookies, and arranged the living room to appear welcoming. Every detail was a performance, a mask of calm hiding the storm within. By 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang, and Jordan ushered them inside, trying his best to play peacemaker. Melissa stepped in first, holding her folder tightly, her smile polished, rehearsed, and dangerously persuasive. "Sherry, what a lovely place you've made for yourself," she said, her eyes sweeping every corner as if assessing my weaknesses. I smiled faintly, nodding. "Thank you, Melissa. It suits me perfectly." She pulled out the folder with an air of triumph. "I've compiled all the information you might need. Maple Grove Residence, Willow Creek, and Sunny Pines, these are the best options for your comfort and safety." I gestured for her to continue, my tone warm, almost inviting. "You'll notice I've even highlighted special amenities, reduced rates if you pay annually, and medical support options tailored to seniors," she said, flipping pages with precision. Jordan chimed in, almost mechanically, "Mom, we just want you to be happy and safe. It's a huge responsibility living alone." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "I appreciate your concern, but I must make the final decision. These are my choices, my life, and my home." Melissa's smile faltered, the first crack in her confident facade. She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial tone. "Sherry, we're only trying to protect your interests. We don't want any mistakes, any regrets." I kept my gaze steady. Protection that comes with manipulation is not protection at all. I've learned to recognize it, Melissa. She blinked, almost imperceptibly, and switched tactics. "Well, there's also the matter of the house. Managing it alone is challenging, and if you moved, it could be simplified, legally." The word legally was weighted, a subtle threat that my sons might not comprehend fully. I leaned back, letting the statement hang in the air like a poisoned arrow. "Yes, the house," I said softly. "And what exactly do you propose, Melissa?" She gestured at Jordan. "We could transfer the title temporarily. That way, everything is handled without extra stress for you. You'll remain the owner, but legally, it would be under our names for convenience." The air thickened. I had anticipated this move, the bait dangling before me. I pressed my lips together, then smiled gently, allowing the weight of my next words to land precisely. "Temporary?" I echoed. "And when I want the house back, what happens then?" Melissa faltered. Jordan stumbled. We'd figure it out," he stammered. I let out a slow breath, eyes fixed on them both. "That's the point, isn't it? Once the title is signed over, there is no returning. I would lose not just my home, but my life's work, my memories, my dignity." Melissa's hands twitched. Vanessa's face would have betrayed her if she were present. I had them cornered with truth, and yet I maintained the calm of someone who had already won. "Sherry," Melissa whispered, leaning forward, "we only want to help you. Think of the burden lifted." I stood, voice firm, resonant, and unyielding. "Help that comes with theft is not help. You wanted to manipulate, to divide my home, to make me pay for my own exile. That ends now." Jordan's eyes widened, a mix of shock and dawning comprehension. "Mom, you can't be serious," he said quietly, voice trembling. I met his gaze, and gently, but with unwavering strength, I said, "I am serious, Jordan. I have made my decision. The house is no longer a pawn. It has been sold, and I have chosen a life of independence and dignity." Melissa's face drained of color. "Impossible. We had an agreement." I shook my head slowly. "No, Melissa. There was never an agreement. There were only your plans, your manipulations, and your delusions of entitlement." Jordan looked at me, searching for answers. "Mom, how?" I gestured toward my small notebook, every entry meticulous, every conversation documented. I have been ready for this, Jordan. Every move you thought was yours to control has already been countered. The sale closed quietly, the funds secured, and my new home prepared. Melissa's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She wanted words, a defense, a lie. There was nothing left. I stepped closer, voice even but cutting. You call that helping? You plotted to claim what isn't yours. You calculated every advantage, and you dragged my son into your schemes. I see now that respect cannot be coerced, only earned. Jordan's eyes glistened, tears threatening. Mom. I didn't know. I know, Jordan. And now you do, I said softly. Respect is not inherited. Love is not entitlement. And a mother's life is not a prize to be divided. Melissa's lips twitched, the final sliver of her control slipping away. You'll regret this, she hissed, storming toward the door. I laughed softly, the sound free, unburdened, and victorious. I have no regrets, Melissa. I have only freedom. Jordan turned to me, his voice trembling with relief and remorse. Mom. I should have seen it. I should have stood with you sooner. I placed a hand on his shoulder, a gentle reminder that lessons are learned in their own time. You will, Jordan. And you will always have a place beside me when you choose integrity over manipulation. Melissa's final glare was the last vestige of threat, evaporating as the door clicked shut behind her. Jordan remained, silent, absorbing the gravity of what had transpired. Nathan called later, a voice filled with shame and longing. Mom. I'm sorry. I understand now. I want to be better, not just for me, but for you too. I listened, letting the weight of his words settle. It's not forgiveness I demand, Nathan. It's awareness, and a willingness to grow. Time will show the rest. Weeks passed, and life settled into a rhythm both predictable and comforting. I walked the park each morning, coffee in hand, observing the world move at its gentle pace. I visited Evelyn, met neighbors, and even joined the local book club, discovering stories of strength, resilience, and independence in women my age. Jordan Jr. began visiting with a nanny, laughter spilling over the balcony as he ran to greet me, reminding me that innocence and love remain untouched by adult deceit. I held him close, teaching myself that protecting the young from adult mistakes does not mean surrendering my own life. Letters from neighbors, small gifts from friends, and the growing success of my shop reminded me daily that life could be rebuilt, cherished, and savored. 6 months later, Jordan called again. Mom. Melissa and I are divorcing, he said, voice steadier than I expected. I wasn't surprised. I asked calmly, and how does that feel? Relieved, he admitted. I've been living her life, not mine. Losing you was the wake-up call I needed. I smiled softly, acknowledging growth and awakening. Then let this be a lesson, Jordan. Freedom, respect, and love cannot be borrowed, they must be chosen. Life continued, steady and serene, each day a testament to the strength it takes to say no, to reclaim dignity, and to live with clarity. I had lost a house, but I had gained my life, and in that, the peace I had fought for finally became mine to savor. The morning sun poured through my balcony window, casting golden light across my small, cozy apartment. It smelled faintly of fresh coffee and the gentle scent of blooming flowers from the park below. I sat in my favorite chair, cup in hand, reflecting on the whirlwind of the past months. The house, my fortress of decades, was gone, but I had never felt so alive. Everything I had feared losing, the possessions, the comfort, the familiar walls, had been illusions compared to the reality of my freedom. I had chosen peace over possession, dignity over obligation, and self-respect over manipulation. The phone rang softly, and I smiled before answering. It was Evelyn, always my anchor, my confidant, the sister I had chosen long ago. Good morning, Sherry. How's the new apartment treating you? She asked, voice warm and playful. I laughed, a soft, carefree sound. Better than I imagined. Bright, quiet, easy. I can breathe again, Evelyn. I can really breathe. She chuckled. I'm so proud of you. You've always been strong, but this is courage. I paused, thinking about Melissa, Vanessa, Jordan, and Nathan. The storm had passed, but the lessons remained sharp, etched into my heart like the grooves of a well-loved book. They thought they were winning, I said slowly. They thought a house, a title, some carefully chosen words could control me. But life isn't about what others plan for you, it's about what you choose for yourself. Evelyn hummed in agreement. And you chose brilliantly. You turned fear into strategy, and manipulation into opportunity. I smiled, but there was a hint of sadness too. It hurts to see your own children misled, to realize that sometimes love is tangled with deception. But I've learned that protecting my dignity doesn't mean abandoning them entirely, it means setting boundaries. I took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth fill me. The sounds of children playing in the park drifted in through the open window, their laughter untainted, pure. Jordan Jr. waved from the street below, and I waved back, my heart swelling. He hadn't been caught in the adult games, and that gave me hope. Life had taught me a profound lesson. Possessions are temporary, but integrity lasts forever. Over the next weeks, I settled into my routine with a sense of liberation I had never known. My small boutique thrived, not just because of my skills but because I had reclaimed my focus and energy. Clients appreciated the personal touch, the care, the attention to detail that came from a woman unburdened by fear or obligation. I joined a book club, attended community events, and met women who had endured similar struggles. Their stories became my inspiration, their courage mirrored my own, and together, we created a network of support that felt like family. Nathan began visiting, slowly rebuilding trust, humbled by his mistakes and aware of the consequences of being swayed by someone else's ambition. "Mom," he said one afternoon, eyes earnest, "I've realized how much I missed seeing life clearly, without influence. I want to be better, to understand before acting." I smiled softly. "That's all anyone can ask, Nathan. Growth takes time, and respect must be earned, not assumed. Remember that." Jordan, too, found his footing, separate from Melissa's shadow. He reached out cautiously, seeking guidance, wanting to reconnect. I welcomed him with open arms, but I held firm to the principles I had fought for: honesty, integrity, and mutual respect. Melissa and Vanessa faded from our lives. Their influence diminished once the house was no longer a prize to claim. They learned, perhaps too late, that control is an illusion when faced with someone determined to stand strong. One quiet evening, I walked through the apartment, letting my hands brush along the walls. Every corner held memories of a life rebuilt, not inherited, not coerced, but chosen. I reflected on the journey, the fear, the anger, the meticulous planning, the final act of reclaiming my home from those who thought they could manipulate me. It struck me that freedom comes not from the absence of challenges, but from the courage to face them with clarity and resolve. Every moment of hesitation, every note taken, every conversation documented had led to this victory, not a victory over my children, but a victory for myself. I had preserved my dignity, safeguarded my choices, and ensured that my remaining years would belong to me, and in that, I discovered the true meaning of power. It is not money, not property, not titles. It is the ability to define your life on your own terms, to act decisively, and to walk away from manipulation with grace. I poured myself another cup of coffee and looked out over the park. The children laughed, the elderly couple strolled hand in hand, the world moved in its gentle rhythm, and I was part of it, fully present, fully alive. I understood now that saying no is a form of love, not just for yourself, but for those around you. By refusing to be coerced, I had demonstrated a lesson that even my sons could absorb with time. Respect, trust, and autonomy are priceless. I reached for my journal, writing down reflections, insights, and gratitude. The experience had taught me more about human nature, resilience, and strategy than any book or seminar ever could. I wanted to share it, to offer guidance to others who might be trapped in similar struggles. Peace is worth more than any possession, I wrote. And freedom is earned through vigilance, courage, and clarity. I looked at the clock and smiled. It was time to film a short video for my channel, a space where I shared these lessons with others. I wanted people to understand that life's treasures are not things, they are choices, dignity, and the courage to stand firm. "Hello, everyone," I began, camera on, voice calm but filled with emotion. I want to share a story about strength, resilience, and the power of saying no. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and your family is to protect your peace. I spoke about the house, the manipulations, the careful planning, and the final act of selling the property. I shared the lessons, how to recognize coercion, how to document interactions, how to strategize with clarity, and how to reclaim agency in one's life. I learned, I said, that family love should never be a tool for control, and possessions should never be weapons in the hands of manipulation. Choosing your path, protecting your dignity, and saying no when necessary are acts of profound love, for yourself and for those you care about. I ended with a gentle call to action. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever struggled with similar challenges, please subscribe to this channel. Together, we can learn, grow, and support each other in creating lives filled with respect, courage, and true freedom. After filming, I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of months lift from my shoulders. I watched the sunset over the park, golden light spilling across my new home, and whispered to myself, I am free. I am strong. I am enough. The journey had been painful, but it had forged wisdom and courage that would last a lifetime, and in that clarity, I finally understood the greatest gift I could leave behind, the lesson that peace, dignity, and self-respect are worth more than any treasure, any house, any illusion of control. From that day forward, every choice I made honored those principles. I invested wisely, nurtured relationships, and embraced a life that was truly my own. I knew that challenges would come, but I had the tools, the mindset, and the courage to meet them head-on. And as I sipped my coffee and watched life unfold in its natural rhythm, I felt a deep, abiding peace, not because I had won a house, or possessions, or approval, but because I had reclaimed myself. I had learned that freedom is a decision, courage is a habit, and peace is a gift earned through vigilance and love, and that, I realized, was the story worth telling, the lesson worth sharing, and the life worth living.